Wally West is one of my favorite DC characters of all time. He's one of the very few characters who actually managed to surpass his predecessor. Pretty much everything about modern Flash is a direct result of some of Wally's iconic stories, even the very concept of the Speed Force originated in Wally's series. But he is primarily loved because of his gradual character development, from a humanizing jerk who had trouble taking anything seriously to a heroic family man. Wally's character development over the decades have been incredible to witness. That said, the past 15 years have been a very interesting period for the character and an absolute roller coaster for his fans. At one point, there was the possibility Wally West was never going to return to the DC universe. He was erased from existence and replaced by a younger version. He was brought back without his memories and his family and was then killed off multiple times. Then they made him an accidental murderer and unintentionally a villain and then threw him into prison. Then things started to change. He got his family and life back and then surprisingly returned as the lead of the Flash comic series again. So how did this all happen? What happened to Wally West to the point that he was erased from existence for years? And how did a character like that eventually become the lead of the Flash series again? Let us dig into the full story starting with the fall. If you had to pinpoint exactly where the fall of Wally West began, it would have to be the 2009 Flash Rebirth storyline, which happened shortly after the return of Barry Allen from the dead in Final Crisis. The 2009 Flash Rebirth storyline officially established Barry Allen as the main Flash of the DC Universe moving forward, and sidelined Wally West completely as he went from the lead of his own series to making cameo appearances every now and then. But even then, there were plans to do a second Flash series that would spotlight Wally, so things had the potential to get better. And then Flashpoint happened. For those who may not be aware, Flashpoint was a DC event story that featured Barry Allen traveling to the past to rescue his mother, which led to the formation of a horrible DC universe that was on the brink of dying. At the end, Barry does manage to reverse his actions, but when he travels back, the DC universe is irrevocably changed in a way that nobody notices, even though it is not the post-apocalyptic universe it was before. Flashpoint was conceived as a simple DC event story, but some people at DC Editorial used it as a way to completely reboot the DC universe so that the characters could be younger. This led to the widespread erasure of several legacy characters, and one of the biggest casualties was Wally West. Wally went from being the lead of the Flash series for decades to becoming an expendable character who could be easily erased from existence. That will always be the lowest point for the character no matter what. Yes, fans were engaged and kept asking for the return of Wally West, but something else happened at the time that encouraged DC to stick to their guns. This was the period where the superhero boom was happening, and DC announced the Flash TV show starring Barry Allen that proved to be incredibly popular and firmly established Barry Allen as the main Flash for the general public, despite heavily borrowing from so many different concepts that were introduced in Wally's stories. DC had very little incentive to actually bring back Wally West and make him the Flash again, so they decided to do something different. They introduced a new version of Wally West, a young biracial Wally West who gained speed powers and was introduced with the clear idea of making him the new Kid Flash and effectively making him the new Wally West of the DC Universe. As you might have imagined, this did not go over well with comic fans. The reason why most people love Wally is because of his character development, and starting afresh meant it was not the Wally West people knew and loved. Every single part of his was widely criticized in different ways, and everybody had a different reason for hating it. The end result was that nobody liked it, and the new Wally West proved to be extremely unpopular, and the Wally West everybody knew was still gone. By 2016, it had been 5 years since Wally West had been erased from existence, and many fans had given up believing that DC would ever bring back the Wally West they cared about. Sure, there was the Convergence miniseries that briefly brought him back, but most people had resigned themselves to the idea that Wally will never be a part of the DC Universe again. And then DC Universe Rebirth happened. Against all odds, DC brought back the Wally West from the pre-Flashpoint timeline to the delight of so many fans. It was extremely well received, and fans were so happy that he was back that they were willing to ignore some of the obvious problems with his return. Wally West joined the Titans team and debuted a brand new Flash suit as well. Then we got to know that despite being from the Flashpoint timeline, he did not remember everything about his life. Hell, he did not even remember his own kids. He was also not together with his wife Linda Park, who also did not remember him anymore. The character was a complete pariah living in a world so much like his own, but also entirely different. That was an interesting status quo for Wally West, and some of his initial stories post-Rebirth explored that quite well. But very soon it became clear that writers were going to drag this out. But the thing is, people were still excited and were happy to follow along, hoping for an epic payoff sometime in the future. It was at this point that DC decided to mess up really badly for the stupidest of reasons. DC published a story called Flash War where Wally finally remembered his kids and battled his old foe Hunter Solomon aka Zoom. The storyline featured Wally being left in a broken mental state and deciding to get treatment to deal with everything that he had learned. This is where the problem started, the infamous Heroes in Crisis storyline. A decision that will forever baffle every DC fan. DC decided to do a superhero mental health story as a murder mystery. I don't know what they were thinking with that, but it was what it was. Heroes in Crisis started with the death of several DC heroes, with the main deaths being that of Wally West himself and Roy Harper. As if it wasn't stupid enough that they turned a potentially incredible mental health story into a lame murder mystery story, DC revealed that the accidental murderer of those heroes was Wally West through some weird speedster shenanigans, and even worse, he had framed other people for his own crimes. The story ended with Wally West as a broken man who was thrown into prison by his own mentor. This completely derailed the character and everything that had been built up since he returned, and as you might have expected, fan reception was absolutely horrible. It was so horrible and almost everybody hated it, and this forced DC to course correct almost immediately. In the immediate aftermath of Heroes in Crisis, DC finally gave Wally West the solo spotlight. He got a new miniseries titled Flash Forward, which slowly started to deal with the things that fans had been waiting for since Wally's return. The story featured Wally West being approached by a cosmic being to serve as its herald of sorts. Wally went on a huge multiversal adventure where he finally got to reunite with his kids, and it gave fans the emotional reunion they had been waiting so many years for. This was immediately followed up by Linda Park regaining her memories as well, and this made sure that the classic Wally-Linda dynamic people had been missing would eventually return. At the end, Wally gained cosmic powers through a series of weird convoluted events, which is not at all important, and this directly led to the Death Metal series. Around this time, there was also a mini retcon that made Reverse Flash partly responsible for Wally's actions during Heroes in Crisis. Death Metal also featured Wally West reuniting with the Titans and making peace with them, along with reuniting with the Flash family, especially characters he hadn't interacted with in so long, like Bart Allen, Max Mercury, and Jesse Quick. More importantly, he finally got to properly be with Linda and his kids. DC also decided to give Wally West his classic Flash shoot back. DC was trying so desperately to make up for their mistakes, and it worked. People were starting to become quite optimistic again about what the future might hold for Wally West. It was at this point DC decided to make a decision that not even Wally West's biggest fans saw coming. The end of Death Metal happened around the same time as the end of Joshua Williamson's run on the Flash series featuring Barry Allen. To the surprise of everybody, DC announced that the next Flash run by writer Jeremy Adams will feature Wally West as the lead. Now, even if DC had been fixing their mistakes with relation to Wally, nobody actually expected to see him replace Barry Allen as the lead character of the Flash series. This decision, however, was extremely well received, but there were still a lot of people who were very apprehensive about it, and they had good reason to be, considering everything that had happened in recent years. But for once, things actually went well for Wally West. The first arc of Wally's return as the main lead of the Flash series took him on a crazy adventure that firmly established that Wally and his family were here to stay. Wally returned to his classic Flash outfit and finally had his family with him. And just to make it better, the story also featured a major retcon that absolved Wally West of any responsibility for the events of Heroes in Crisis, which was honestly very necessary. With the demons of his past finally banished, Wally West, under the capable writing of Jeremy Adams, began his life as the Flash anew, leading to an excellent Flash run that finally brought back the Wally West people had been missing for so long. It also revitalized the Flash family with Wally as the focus, just as it always had been. The dynamic between Wally and Linda was an absolute delight to witness, and just when people thought they had seen it all, DC surprised everybody and announced Wally and Linda were going to have a third kid, and somehow they made it happen without subjecting Wally to another new tragedy, which was a huge surprise, honestly. Slowly, Wally West went from being the character who was getting the treatment nobody wanted their favorite character to get, to being the character who got the treatment everybody wanted their favorite character to get. It was a complete reversal of fortunes, unlike anything before, but absolutely for the better. A lot of fans expected Barry Allen to return as the lead of the Flash series sooner or later, even hardcore Wally West fans. After all, Barry Allen had a major live-action movie coming up, but somehow that never happened. Wally West is still going strong in the Flash comics and has just gotten a new series with a brand new creative team after the end of the excellent Jeremy Adams run. A few years ago, DC had trouble using Wally West anywhere, but now even in random alternate universes, Wally West is shown as the Flash much like how it was before 2010. Now, it is safe to say that Wally West is here to stay no matter what, at least for the foreseeable future. The past few years have been an absolute roller coaster for the character of Wally West. He suffered some of the worst things that could happen to a comic character, especially a big character. He was literally erased from existence for 5 years. But somehow, despite all the odds, he made his comeback and after some major hiccups, eventually managed to reclaim his position as the main lead of the Flash series, and I hope he stays in the role for a long time to come. Wally West absolutely deserves